Okay, I think everybody should be able to hear me now. I've just got to throw the link here in a couple of places. And the good news is I figured out where all I needed to put the link. So I just have to enter it in a couple of places. It looks like I have everything entered. So I just want to thank everybody for putting up with the blooper reel that I just did earlier, trying to get this live stream to go. And yep, everything is good there. Now I am going to share my screen. Maybe. It's like, I know how to do this, and I may have forgot. All right. Now, everybody should be seeing the understanding 1099's how to navigate the changing landscape, I believe. All right. So I'm just gonna go ahead and okay. I'm still having technical difficulties. I do know what I'm doing with the tech that we're using. I tried to go a different route. For some reason, when I resume my slideshow, there we go. It's working. I am getting a lot of material for a blooper reel today. So we're understanding 1099's how to navigate the changing landscape. We have a lot of interesting changes that are happening in 1099's this year. And, just a general disclaimer that this information is accurate at the time that I've recorded, made every effort to make sure that all the information here is accurate. What we'll cover. 1099 forms, who needs them, how to fill them out, types of 1099s, 1099 options. We're going to talk a little bit about the form 1096 and form 945. Knowing when and how to report on 1099s, 1099Ks, super complicated topic. We're going to just touch on a little bit. And then we're going to talk about reporting errors. And then if people have questions, we'll go ahead and answer questions. And I'm going to stop my sharing for just a second because there's something wrong with my my slideshow. And I don't want to keep looking off to my other screen for this. Wow. It's not staying. I'm just going to close all of this, and then I'm going to reopen it. But 1099s, there's always a ton of questions about 1099s every year. And a couple of years ago, to answer questions, I actually started on my YouTube channel reading all of the instructions on 1099s, and then I branched out to other payroll topics. Okay, I've got everything ready, so I'm going to go ahead and start the share again. Unfortunately, it started my slides back at the beginning. All right. So common 1099s are the most common that we're going to see as accountants and bookkeepers and business owners are the 1099 NEC, which are reports of payments to contractors, the 1099 miscellaneous, which reports other various types of payments not reported on another 1099, a 1099K, which we receive when total payments are in excess of $20,000 and transactions are more than 200 made through a payment processor. A 1099 INT reports interest, a 1099 DIV reports dividends, a 1099G, which a lot of people hadn't received or seen much because until the pandemic, but it reports tax refunds, unemployment, and other types of payments received from the state, local, or federal government. And then in 2024, there will be a new 1099 called the 1099-DA, which is for digital assets. And there are many different types of 1099s, which I've also listed on this slide. And I will be uploading a PDF of the slide presentation today so that you can take a look and review it later at your leisure. What is a 1099 and who is it for? 1099s are informational returns sent to people who you've paid certain types of income to throughout the year. I call them tattletale forms because a lot of the informational returns are used only to report who you paid, and there's no other information. It's who you paid and how much you paid them, and it is so that those people will claim all of their income, which as a business owner you should be claiming all your income anyway. Who receives a 1099 miscellaneous or 1099 NEC? It's a contractor or a vendor who you've paid for services who is not a corporation, and you paid more than $600 in cash or cash equivalent during the year. A landlord who is not a property management company, an attorney who is paid more than $600, no matter the entity type. And that is a key determining factor when sending out 1099s to most entities, is you don't send them to C Corps or S Corps. But attorneys, it doesn't matter what their entity type is, you send a 1099 to an attorney. Some of the lesser common that I have created 1099s for are cropland rent. A lot of times the cropland rent is sent, I see it a lot in construction where plots of land are being purchased, but they're not ready to develop it yet. So they rent it usually back to the farmer that they bought it from. Commercial fishers, and because they deal a lot with cash and cash equivalent. And then anybody who receives more than $10 in royalties. And here are the examples of the different types of 1099s. Got miscellaneous, non-employee compensation, interest income, and dividend and distributions. The two most common types of 1099s that we as accountants or business owners are going to create is a 1099 miscellaneous, And there's a lot of different types of income that get reported on a 1099 miscellaneous. If you have an employee who became deceased during the year or during a previous year, there are special rules on reporting their wages and income to their estate. So they'll get a W-2 and a 1099 miscellaneous in the year that they became deceased. And if income gets paid in years after they've become deceased, it only gets reported on a 1099 miscellaneous. I have a whole playlist on my channel that talks about handling deceased employee wages. And rent paid to a landlord who is not a property management company, crop insurance proceeds, golden parachute payments, and non-qualified deferred compensation. I cover those instructions a lot more on my 1099 playlist. And the 1099 NEC is a form specifically created or reactivated to report non-employee compensation. And on the 1099 miscellaneous, I want you to notice that they have become continuous forms recently. So if you see in this calendar year box, it has 20, and then it's a blank space for you to fill in the year. And that means that when you buy 1099 forms or get 1099 forms from the IRS, for those of us that are still able to paper file, you will be able to just keep using the same form and just put the current year on it. Box 1 is where you will report the rent that is paid to a landlord who is not a property management company. 2 is where royalties get reported. 3 is other income, and that is where usually the deceased employee wages will go. There's a lot of other things that go in box 3, and I have several videos on what goes in box 3 and how to determine what goes in box 3. And if any federal income tax was withheld, that goes in box 4. Fishing boat proceeds go in box 5. Medical and healthcare payments go in box 6. And box 7 is on both the 1099 miscellaneous, and I believe it's box 2 on the 1099 NEC. And that is when a payer makes direct sales totaling $5,000 or more of consumable products to recipients for resale. So let's say I make raw goat milk soap and I sell $5,000 of it to a boutique in town, and it's a product that they're going to resell. I check that box. And if that is the only transaction that I had with that business, you fill out the payer information with your information, the recipient information with the information for the boutique, and check box 7. And I'm sure there was a reason that they put it on both the miscellaneous and the NEC, but I'm not sure as to what that reason is. And then box 8 has substitute payments in lieu of dividends or interest. There's a lot of complexity involved with determining if you can put it on box 8 or if it goes on a 1099 dividend or 1099 interest reporting form. Crop insurance proceeds go in box 9. gross proceeds paid to an attorney go in 10. This is not where you would put any any payments that you made to an attorney. Say you're getting your legal forms updated, buying a contract, or have a consulting agreement with an attorney or a law firm. That goes in box 3 of the 1099 NEC. The only thing that go in gross proceeds paid to an attorney is if there's a lawsuit involved and the person who loses the lawsuit sends the proceeds to the attorney, and then the attorney sends it to the claimant. That is what goes in box 10. I know a lot of people get confused on that. And I have a couple of different videos where I go over the box 10 instructions that's in the 1099 playlist. Box 11 is fish purchased for resale, and that is commercial fish. 12 is section 409A deferrals. 14, excessive golden parachute payments, which are payments in excess of, I think it's $1 million. I'm not positive. I know this when I actually read the instructions online. And that goes in box 14. Box 15 is non-qualified deferral compensation. And again, I have a video on all of these boxes on the YouTube channel in the 1099 playlist. And then if any state tax was withheld, that goes in boxes 16, 17, and 18. And the 1099 NEC, also a continuous year form. And I said box 3. I am so used to things going, they've changed things around. It's box 1 on the non-employee compensation or the 1099 NEC is where you would put any money paid to a subcontractor, a vendor that you buy services from, which includes auto repair. I get that question a lot. It's like, do I have to 1099 the repair shop? Maybe, but you needed to get a W-9 from them. And attorney wages or attorney fees paid for regular legal services go in box 1. And again, there is the box 2 for the made direct sales totaling 5,000 or more of consumer products to recipient for resale. And box 4 is the federal income tax withheld. And we'll talk more about when you have to withhold federal income tax or state income tax from somebody that you pay. And box 5, 6, and 7 is if you withhold state income tax. 1096, when do you need to file a 1096? Well, only when you mail in paper copies of a 1099. And there are also several different forms that a 1096 is the cover letter for. If you look in section 6, there is 2 full lines and a partial line of different forms that you will use a 1096 as a cover letter for. You can only check one box in section 6. So if you've got a 1099 NEC, a 1099 miscellaneous, and a 1099 INT. You will, and you're going to paper file those 3 forms. You will need 3 separate 1096s as cover letters. And you do not use or prepare a 1096 when you electronically submit your 1099s. 945 is if you would withhold any backup withholdings or voluntary withholdings from one of your subcontractors, then you will fill out a form 945. Backup withholdings are required if you get a letter from the IRS that says, we need you to do backup withholdings on this contractor. And then there's not really a way around it, because you're getting notification that backup withholdings are required. But let's say a contractor refuses to give you a W-9. I withhold backup withholdings from their invoice with a note that says backup withholdings have been deemed required because we don't have a W-9 on file. And another note that says, you know, maybe an email or something that goes along with it that says, if you supply us your W-9, we will return the backup withholdings that we've withheld prior to sending them to the IRS. If we don't, and it works like magic. It's like all of a sudden you're not paying the vendor's invoice in full. And the only way to get their invoice in full is to send in the W-9. Amazingly, usually their only other question is, where do I send the W-9? And I have seen where contractors request voluntary backup withholdings. It usually, when I see it, it's the contractors that are not great with money. And there's certain industries where that seems to be more true than others. So, but, and if they request voluntary withholdings, then it is still up to your discretion if you're going to accept it and do the voluntary backup withholding, or if you are not. And this is just what a form 945 looks like. And so back when we were talking about the contractor not giving you the W-9, if they get you the W-9 before the end of the year, you can pay them what you withheld for backup withholdings as long as it hasn't already been sent to the IRS, and I'll hang on to it until the end of the year. And then if we don't get the W-9, then I submit the payments on EFTPS and send the IRS a 945. Reporting 1099s. All right, who submits a 1099? Business owners who have independent contractors or freelancers working with them. Some examples of independent contractors would be a copywriter, somebody who helps you do the work that you do. You just have to be careful with having subcontractors like that, because there are some states where they're requiring subcontractors who help you perform your main revenue producing line of work, as you can't have them as contractors anymore. They have to be employees. That is a whole nother workshop. business owners who pay rent to another business that is not a property manager, business owners who pay attorney fees. I will be fine in like 2 minutes if you guys can put up with it for right now. I apologize. All right. When are 1099s issued? And if you've been in business for a couple of years, you'll remember when there was not a 1099 NEC, but the contractor payments were reported on a 1099 miscellaneous. The due date is the reason why those forms are now separate, because the 1099 NEC is due to the recipient and to the IRS by January 31st or the next, or the Monday that's not a holiday after January 31st, if January 31st falls on a weekend. 1099 miscellaneous is due to the recipient by January 31st and to the IRS by March 31st if e-filed, or February 28th if mailed, which is the same for the 1099 DIV and INT. And I made this little chart to help with that. And then 1099 filing requirements, and the IRS was talked about their step down for e-filing requirements. It was 250, and then it was going to be 100, then it was going to be 10 or 50, and then 10. But they kept skipping a lot of their step down e-filing requirement limits. So in 2020, well, in 2024 for 2023 tax year, it is a total of 10 of the following forms, and they're aggregated together. So it's a total of 10 forms from the chart that I have on here, which includes 1095Bs, 1095Cs, and the 1099 series forms and W-2s. So if you've got somebody with 9 employees and 2 contractors, they have to e-file during for the year. And prior to this year, the tax forms were not aggregated together. So let's say we were going to use the old rules, but it was still 10 and of something, and you had to e-file. If you had 9 employees and 2 contractors, you would still be fine. But with the rules where it's 10 of any of the, or any 10 forms of the forms on this list, you have to e-file. So that, I think, is gonna maybe catch some people by surprise. And I don't know how aggressive the IRS is gonna go after businesses with penalties, but just know that the business can and probably will be subject to penalties if if there are more things being paper filed. Businesses can and probably will be subject to penalties if the forms are being paper filed, and they should be e-filed. And there's a lot of different options available for e-filing your forms. Payroll softwares will usually e-file the W-2s as a standard course. But if they don't, track 1099 and tax 1099 integrate with most accounting software. And I use both track 1099 and tax 1099 for different aspects of our business. With tax 1099, I can e-file corrected W-2s without having first filed the original W-2s with that software. It's the only software that I have found that allows you to do that. But track 1099 definitely has a better interface. There's other softwares like eFile for Biz, Tax Bandits. I don't know, there's dozens of software out there. And they're the three I listed on the slide are definitely, the most common example, but there's dozens of paid options for 1099s and maintaining vendor W-9s. And then there's free options, which is using the Fire site on SSA, or no, it's using the Fire site, which is on the IRS website, but it requires a transmitter control code, which if you haven't applied for one yet, you're probably not going to get it before the deadline, because it takes 45 days at minimum to get that code, which using the Fire system is the recommended option for filing forms other than 1099. And also if you have a large volume of forms, but with Iris is also an option, but it also requires a TCC code, but it's a different TCC code from the Fire website. And the limit is you can submit up to 100 records per upload with the CSV template. If you have more than 100 records, you submit multiple CSV. So there's the way around that. But if it can be time consuming. Now, I'm sure this is the reason that most people are here is for the 1099K and payment processors update. So a 1099K is a form it's a form that you get, which reports payments that you got for goods or services during the year. And a lot of time, most of the 1099s are for services only and not goods, unless they're wrapped up with the service and not separated out. But 1099K is issued when payments are made by credit, debit, stored value cards such as gift cards or other payment cards, payment apps, and online marketplaces, also called third-party settlement organizations. The 1099K is created by the merchant service or payment card company. And it's basically anyone who receives payment on your behalf for a fee and then sends you the money. They can either deposit the whole amount and then pull their fee separately, or deposit your fee net, or deposit your money less the fee. But their 1099K reporting is getting to be a little bit more complex. Simply because of some of the rules that are in effect and how different merchant service providers interpret the rules on what payments get included, because the first bullet on here says credit or debit or stored value cards such as gift cards. However, and I'll go into it in more detail on a future slide, there are some merchant processors that are including ACH because they charge a fee to process the ACH payment. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about the current thresholds and what the proposed threshold is for next year. And recently the IRS changed to the pushback, or they pushed back the transition. So 1099Ks will have the same rules as previous years, which are annual gross payments exceeding $20,000 and 200 transactions. But I know we have gotten 1099Ks that are below the minimum threshold. My husband's company, for example, he gets a 1099K and he doesn't exceed $20,000 in sales through the merchant account or 200 transactions. And the merchant sends it out anyway. And that's been going on since he first started getting a 1099K, or when, I should say that a different way, when he started his business, he's always gotten a 1099K. Some years it's 4,000, some years it's, 15,000 or whatever gets processed through that individual processor. It doesn't matter. He gets a 1099K. The thresholds for 2024 currently are annual gross payments exceeding $5,000 and no minimum transaction threshold. So theoretically, any payment in excess of $5,000 is going to get a 1099K. So when we're creating our 1099 miscellaneous or our 1099 NEC, how do we know what payments we have to exclude? Certain software, if you put debit in the check number field when you're entering a bank account, that it'll automatically exclude debit transactions. Anything that's set up on the chart of accounts as a credit card will automatically be excluded. PayPal, as long as it's not friends and family, should be excluded if you've got somebody sending PayPal payments to contractors and using friends and family. Just know that those payments need to be included as cash or cash equivalent. Venmo business, not Venmo personal. Again, it's the same thing with PayPal and Venmo. If it's a personal, that's not being, there's no 1099K being issued. I know there's been a lot of controversy about that, but that is one of the things that is still going to happen. It's just not going to happen immediately. some ACH payments. And this is where you're really going to have to rely on the person that you're paying to know what their processor is going to do. I use Ignition, and Ignition sends me a 1099K for all of my ACH transactions. In the resources, I have added a link to the FAQ that Ignition has, and where they say that they issue a 1099K for ACH transactions. And, personally, I'm going to include ACH transactions for everybody unless I have a vendor tell me that they're using a processor that includes ACH payments. But, sometimes if you know that certain vendors or certain payment processors include ACH on their 1099K, and you can tell who the payment processor is on the bank statement, you can exclude those payments. But it's the figuring all that stuff out is definitely going to be time consuming. So my recommendation is include ACH payments unless you're told by the vendor not to include them, or unless you know that somebody is being paid through Ignition. Because overstating revenue when it's included on a 1099K, like some businesses don't get money any other way than through a merchant account. So if you pay somebody, say a smaller amount, like $1,000, and you send them a 1099 NEC, but their processor is sending them a 1099K for 100% of their annual revenue, then that 1099 NEC just overstated their reported income to the IRS by $1,000. And there are a couple of different ways that a business can fix that. The easiest way is to file a corrected 1099 NEC, and I'll talk about filing corrections on a future slide. But I've never been in the camp of when in doubt, send it out. Though that phrase is hard for me to say. It makes me cringe, because when in doubt, ask questions or read the rules. And, there are some times when you still really don't know. And if you can't determine whether or not to send the 1099, figure out what instruction bullet point on, the 1099 instructions, or the IRS website, or a reputable source. Find something that you can use as a defense in the event that you got it wrong, and say, this is why I did it this way. You don't even have to get it wrong. I said that not correctly. In the event that the IRS questions something, because the IRS gets it wrong a lot when they're questioning things, but in the event that something gets questioned, the client gets a notice or a possible penalty, have something that's going to back up why you did what you did. And that is definitely something that a lot of people have to think about. And lately, I've noticed a lot of people don't want to think very hard about things. And I think that might be a sign of overwhelm where it's just like, I just can't. I have one more decision to make for the rest of the day and it's 2:00. I can't make this decision. It's called decisional fatigue. And make sure you've got people that you can use as a sounding board to ask the tough questions. I've just got some 1099Ks here as an example of what goes on each one. Reporting errors. It's important to reach out to the business who issued an incorrect 1099 as soon as possible to ask them to correct the error. Because sometimes if it's caught early enough, then the business can reissue or void a 1099 prior to sending the incorrect one to the IRS. And filing a corrected 1099 it's pretty easy. It's almost too easy. It's a lot of the forms, it's super complicated and you have to do all of this extra work to file a corrected form. But with the IRS, you at the top of the 1099 box form, you click the box that says corrected and put the correct information on the form. If you're zeroing something out, you put a 0 in the line that originally had information reported on it. And you just have to be careful not to, if you send in 2 1099s for the same EIN and they have different amounts on them, what happens is the IRS adds those 2 1099s together, and then you'll have made a bigger mess. If you're correcting a form, you always want to put the correct information and mark the corrected box. If you're paper filing, you will just mark the corresponding 1099 form on the 1096. Also, I just realized I was missing a slide. But when you are making corrections, filing corrected forms, whether it's a corrected 1099 or a corrected W-2, it is required that you correct it in the same manner that the original was filed. So if the originals were filed by paper, the corrections have to be filed by paper as well. If they were e-filed, the corrections have to be e-filed. There are penalties if you e-file the original 1099 and paper file the correction. Most of the e-file software has a box that you can check and indicate if it is a if the information that you're reporting is corrected or not. All right. I had a moderator lined up and I've got a fill-in moderator. So I am going to put myself on mute and find out if I've got any questions in the chat or anything. So give me one moment, please. But while I'm doing that, I've got a resources page and a way that you guys can contact us. I'm going to leave the contact me form or showing for just a moment. All right. Um, it looks like the couple of places that I had people asking me questions, there, it was mostly questions about the Zoom link and but I did have one early on that asked if we were going to describe the difference between a 1099K, 1099 NEC, and 1099 miscellaneous. And we did talk about each of those forms. So hopefully I did answer that question. There was what form of payments do not need to be on a 1099? Does this include Zelle, Venmo, Apple Pay? The list is long. It depends for Venmo and Apple Pay, but I think, you know, as long as you are using a as long as the payment is going through a merchant account, and this is where it's a little hard for me because I'm always talking as the person receiving the 1099K, and that isn't necessarily what people are asking. And I'm like, well, if it doesn't get included on the 1099 NEC for me because it's being included on the 1099K, but the rambling, I apologize. The answer is that when a payment is made through a payment processor, it will be included on the payment processor's 1099K, and it should not be included on a 1099 NEC or 1099 miscellaneous. But there are some payments that it's kind of hard to figure out, and short of researching each individual processor and how they interpreted the 1099 rules, it unfortunately goes to the whole famous accountant answer. It depends, because it some payment processors put things on 1099Ks that I don't believe they should, which is ACH payments. It's my firm belief that ACH payments should go on a 1099 NEC. However, I know some payment processors include ACH on their 1099K. So the best we can do is, if the vendor says I'm getting a 1099K, don't just take their word for it. Have them send you the FAQ article from their payment processor that says, yes, 109 ACH is included on the 1099K. And let's see, there was one more question that I wanted to address. And it has to deal with contractors, but it really could be asked about any number of different vendors. But say you're working for a general contractor and one of the subcontractors is the electrician. Do you include the total of all the payments that you made to the electrician? Because the electrician's invoice is going to include material and their labor. And the answer is yes. In that case, you would send a 1099 for the material and the labor, because the electrician is retaining the right to write off the material that they purchased to do that job. An example of when you don't include the material is, say same contractor has hired somebody to stage a model house that they have built, and the stager charges them sends them an invoice for their service, but they send them a reimbursement request for everything that they purchased to put in that home. If that stager sends them the original copies of the most of the time it's going to be a store receipt or a store invoice, depending on if they're buying large like furniture or if they're just going to a home good store and purchasing knickknacks. If the stager gives the original receipts to the contractor, then the material purchases are expensed by the contractor and not the stager. Then you only include the labor on the 1099 NEC. All right.
A reply. Somebody's looking at or replay when it's.
Oh, the replay will be available always. And then I accidentally stopped sharing before I gave you guys the special offer. I do have a payroll mastermind and we talk about payroll related things. We'll talk about 1099s. We'll talk about, different, some bookkeeping, some business strategies, some niching and how to figure out, what direction you want to take your business. I do have, it's a private Facebook group. Every week I go live in that Facebook group answering questions that were asked during the week. I do try to answer all of the questions at least during the week. As they get asked, I usually go in there once or twice a day to answer all the questions. And during the 20-minute live every week, I'll answer questions that if people show up and ask questions, I will answer those questions. If we have time left over, then I discuss in more detail some of the other answers that I have given. There is no contract with the mastermind. You sign up and you just let me know 30 days before you get billed again if you want to cancel. I do have a lot more information on the link on the slide. And like I said, these slides, the PDF of these slides will be uploaded just as soon as I am done with the live stream. And if I can't upload the PDF, then it'll be a link that takes you to a PDF of the slide. I don't see any more questions, and we are exactly at the top of the hour. So I'm going to thank everyone for joining me live. I really appreciate if you tried to join at 1 o'clock Central, and I was having a bunch of technical difficulties. And we'll see you